Hi there, thanks for stopping by. In today's video I'm going to show you how to make a button from my Zwirnknopf Buttons book. I very excitingly named this Mandala 5. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to mark out divisions. Solely because I know that some people prefer to. Once you're practiced, you won't need to mark out divisions quite so often unless you want real precision. So I'm going to use the circle gauge. For this particular button, we need to lay 10 wraps for 20 spokes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this particular marker, which has 10 spokes, and then all I'll need to do is lay a wrap in between my marks. So you probably won't be able to see these marks because they're only in pencil, but you get the idea, I'm sure. Let's say with practice you won't really need to. Not for this number of spokes. You may wish to for the larger ones. So the first thing that we need to do is choose our color 1, and I'm going to leave this on the ball. You may wish to use a bit of beeswax. Just rub on the edge. I'm not going to rub it on the face of the ring because obviously that will smudge my marks. And on the back. And what this does is it just gives a little bit of tackiness and stops your threads from slipping. So it's particularly helpful if you're new to this type of button. I'm going to hold the end of the thread at the back of the button, and I'm just going to hold it there. If you find that you have difficulty and your thread slips, go ahead and tie it at your starting point. And now I'm going to wrap from bottom to top, joining 2 marks. So that is 1 wrap, and then I want 2 ends on this wrap. So that means I want 2 threads side by side. Okay, so to explain the terminology, in case you aren't familiar with the terms I use in my button making, a wrap goes across the face of the button. A spoke goes from the center out. So each wrap has 2 spokes, and in this case the wrap is made up of 2 ends of thread. And I'm going to slightly rotate and catch that initial thread there, and then in between the 2 marks I'm going to lay another 2 ends, and so that is wrap number 2. And then I'm going to carry on so that I have 10 wraps around the button. And so that last wrap, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 10 wraps, and that has created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 spokes. So the spokes from the center out. Now I'll cut a bit from the ball and thread my needle. Now at this point you mustn't let go. So you can either hold this while you're threading your needle, or if you have difficulty doing this, you could always use the third hand and clip and just clip that in while you're doing that, okay? And now I just need to fasten this thread at the back, so that's why I needed to thread the needle. I'm just going to go through at the back. I'm not going to the front of the button. And I'm just going to make a little knot. And then at that point, I can now let go. Go ahead and tweak if you need to tweak any of your spokes. Make sure that everything sort of lines up and nothing slipped too far out. As you wrap, your tension needs to be sort of taut, but not too tight. If it's too tight, your spokes will move. And now we're going to add color 2. Again, I'm going to leave color 2 on the ball, but I'm going to thread the end through the needle and just take it through at the back of the button, unthread the needle, tie a little knot, snip the tail so it doesn't get in our way later, and then pull that in. That is now secure, and we can do the next section of wrapping with color 2. So for color 2, we need to lay one end, so that's one piece of thread, skipping 6 spokes. Okay, so let's just anchor to start off. We need to skip the spokes, so we're on 1, and then we need to skip 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we need to anchor there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the skipped spokes. The 2 either side of the skipped, we anchor the thread. And then rotate and repeat. And again, if any of your spokes seem a little uneven, go ahead and tweak them at this stage. It will get harder to do this as you fill the button with more thread. And so each of those spokes needs to have a thread going in each of the directions, so anchored off in each direction. Then you'll know that you've come full circle and create that circle in the center. Again, at this point, we need to hold that secure, thread the needle, and just fasten the thread at the back. Now we need to bring in color 3. Now color 3 needs to actually be cut from the spool. So I'm going to go with a yellow so that you should be able to see a nice contrast. And I'm going to cut about an arm's length. It's easy enough to add threads, so you don't need to worry if you don't end up having enough. I have threaded one end onto a needle, and the other end I'm just going to tie a little knot. And I'm going to draw that through at the center back of the button. So now we need to lay a vertical stitch at every other color 2 cross. Okay, so this is the cross that I'm speaking about. And we're going to come all of the way down. You'll probably find it easier to come up and then to work down. And if you can, for an extra tidy button, go between the spokes as well. Don't split the thread. Okay. And I'm going to skip one of them and do the same for the next. And then so on all of the way around. Check and make sure. See, I've got a few stitches that appear to be a little bit longer, therefore a little bit looser. So it's not a bad idea to just go through, tighten them up a little bit in order so that everything looks as even as you can get it. And now we want to wrap the ring with the same color. And so we're going to wrap the ring at every spoke. And what I mean by this is I'm going to come up, so this is the one where I'm closest. I'm going to come up at the center there, and then I'm going to go down, and I'm going to go between the two blue or color one spokes. Okay, so the first one, always a little bit more difficult to establish. You want this to sit on top, if you can, on top of those center spokes. And then we'll fasten that at the back. Now we're going to go back to color one. I'm going to cut a length, again about an arm's length is good. Thread one side with the needle. Now I'm going to work blanket stitches to cover the ring, so in between each of those spokes. I'm going to hold the end of my thread at the back and cover it over with the stitches. You can just simply add the end of the thread as we have done with the other additions. I'm going to make the blanket stitch. There's one, and then take your thread down so that the ridge of the blanket stitch goes to the back of the button. And we want to put 3 in each gap. I'll do another gap and then I'll show you the back so that you can see what I mean about the ridges. And you see the ridges, let's just get that in focus, the ridges are forming at the back. What this is also doing is covering that wrapped thread. So if any of them has come a little bit away, make sure that as you work, you tweak it before you put the blanket stitch on, because once the blanket stitch is on, you won't be able to tweak it really. I'm just going to snip that end so it doesn't bother me now that it's fastened, and carry on. And then I'm going to fasten that at the back. I like to fasten the blanket stitches to themselves through the ridge. I just think it makes for a little bit of a cleaner finish. A little bit of a knot. And now we move on to color 4. So again, we're going to need a length cut from the spool, thread it onto your needle with a small knot at the other end. Now you need to come up at the center and come up as much in the center as you possibly can, okay? And then we're going to wrap in a spiral, taking the thread underneath this stitch that we created. Now it doesn't matter which direction you go, just make sure that you go in the same direction, because what you want is loops, not crossings. So let's say if I do it with my needle pointing to the right, then at the bottom my needle still effectively, if we were going around in a circle, would be pointing to the right. Does that make sense? Then up to the next one. And don't pull these too tight, because you want the loops to form quite nicely and to be loops. If you pull too tight, you may find that they sort of close up on you. As I say, rotating the button you may not actually need to do. I'm just trying to rotate it so that you can see what I'm doing a little bit more easily, hopefully. So I have a loop on all of them. I can go through and tighten them if I wish. This last one now needs to go up and then down through the center. So that gives a little flower or daisy pattern at the center. And now we need to wrap the ring in this color. Just going to pull that over a little bit. Now we're going to wrap in one direction and then in the next. Okay, so it's usually easier to start on the edge of the ring and then go down, simply because you can find your place a little bit more easily. But I'm going to come up where there isn't, at the edge of the ring, where there isn't a stitch. And then I'm going to go down where there is. And again, up, then down. This is possibly the one color I could have chosen a little bit differently. So that you could see it a bit better, but I'm hoping that it will come together well enough. I did already film this once, but when I went back and looked at it, the colors were so close together, I don't think that anyone would have been able to see what I was doing. It was a nice button, but perhaps a little too subtle. So now you can see I've come back to the beginning. So I'm just going to turn over and I'm going to anchor underneath the ridge. Okay. So now you have to do the same, but you're going to go back in the opposite direction. So how you hold will depend on sort of what suits you and feels most comfortable. But basically, you're making a series of V's along the edge of the ring. A little bit of a kink there. And so there are the little V's at the edge. And then just go ahead and anchor at the back. Then I'm going to go back to color 2. Nope, back to color 3. The same color as we worked those little stitches. I'm going to thread a very short, I only need a short piece, but I've got some left from the length that I cut. Thread it onto a needle, knot at the end. I'm going to fasten this before I come up so that I can really tweak to come up. So you want to come up at the center, and you basically want to make a cross stitch or a few at the center of this flower, just to hold those loopy bits in place, because they will shift and move if you don't. And it can be sort of a tiny stitch, or it can be something where you make a real focal point out of it. And of course, depending on the colors that you may have chosen, it may turn out to be a very big focal point. then that's it. Now, of course, the point of the mandala buttons is that I just created the mandala buttons as working. So I'm adding extra stitches and extra flourishes. And you can carry on and keep adding more and more with this button, really to your heart's content. Here is one that I've worked in a much finer thread, and I've added extras. So you can see how you can carry on and make a very different looking button just by adding a few extra stitches and a few extra threads. So for instance here I've added a darker color either side, so it would be either side of these V's, and I'd work those in exactly the same way. I've added some extra stitches, so I've anchored down this stitch and I've placed another little stitch at each of those crosses. So you can just carry on and keep making once you have the basic foundation. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video and feel inspired to make a mandala button. You can find all of the tools and materials over on our website, as well as the book, Zwirnknopf Buttons. Do please click like, hit that subscribe button, and leave me a comment. Love to hear from you. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.